Hello and welcome to episode 1 of everydaylinux.net. Today I'm going to walk you through a basic install of Kubuntu Linux. Before we get started, there's a couple of things we need to establish. I'm going to assume that you're just a basic computer user, that not a lot of technical knowledge, that you are familiar with Windows and how to move around in Windows, and things like downloading and saving and opening files, and burning your own CDs and DVDs. Of course, if you have any questions about those, go ahead and feel free to email me or leave a comment here, and I can walk you through some of that. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we're just going to assume that you're already familiar with that kind of stuff. As we go through, there are going to be a few techie terms that you're going to hear, and if you have any questions about those, the first place I'll direct you to is everydaylinux.net. You'll see at the top of my site here this techie terms link. Go ahead and click on that. And that'll give you a basic rundown. There aren't too many of them, maybe 2 pages. This should answer any questions you have about any of the terms that you're going to hear me use that are applicable to what we're doing. If you do have any questions about anything in this tutorial, feel free to email me or leave a comment, and I'll answer those as best I can for you. So starting at the very beginning, we're going to need to download a copy of Linux. There's a couple of ways to get that. Go to kubuntu.org, kubuntu.org, or I have actually a link to it right here on my site at Linux Resources, right there. And if you haven't noticed, I'm actually doing this screen recording on a Windows 7 machine in my office at work. It's kind of a slow day today, so I'm killing some time. So here we are at the main kubuntu.org website. Lots of information here if you're not familiar with Linux, KDE, Ubuntu. There's all kinds of helpful stuff here. The community is probably going to be your best resource for support. But again, if you've got any questions about what we're doing in this tutorial, feel free to email me or leave a comment, and I'll help you out with this stuff. So we're going to click on Get Kubuntu. And then there's this download link right here. So here we've got a variety of ways to go about getting it. The main ones we're going to be concerned with are these ones up here. If you're familiar with BitTorrent and torrenting things, that's actually going to be your fastest way to download it. And here's your options here. What we're going to do, though, is go ahead and grab this link here. But I guess before we move on to that, you see we've got the CD versions and the DVD versions. The advantage to downloading the DVD is you're getting more software in the ISO image. As far as I know, you're getting pretty much all of the software that's available to download for free. And that's nice because it's already there. You don't have to download it again. We're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and just get the CD version, and if when we get finished with the install, any additional software that we want to get, we're going to go ahead and download that on the internet. So we're going to click on this link here. Here we have some mirrors, just other sites you could download from, depending on where you are in the world. One of these might be more appropriate for you, just because it's closer and faster. And then we've got our version numbers here. Right now, the only one available is the latest release, the LTS release. You might see, depending on when you come in here, you might see a variety of other versions that you can download in this drop-down menu. You're going to want to go with the latest LTS release, and that's the latest stable release that they have. That's the one you're going to want. And then, of course, we've got these 32-bit and 64-bit options here. And that has to do with the architecture of your computer, of the motherboard and the processor, and how it moves memory and information in and out of memory and to the processor. I'm not going to go into that. It's not really applicable for what we're doing, but it is important that you know what you've got here. If you've bought anything, a brand new computer since about 2010 on, chances are it's a 64-bit machine. Just about everything out there that's being sold now is 64-bit. If you don't know, go ahead and just go with the 32-bit option here. You can go with that by default. If you download the 32-bit version, It will run on 64-bit hardware. That's not a problem. The only drawback to that, and you may or may not notice it, is that you're not getting the full benefit of the 64-bit architecture. So we're going to go ahead and go with the 32-bit download just because we don't know what we've got. You click on this link and it's going to open up your download option. It's going to ask you where you want to put it. Just save it to your downloads folder. That's going to be your easiest option. Or depending on what you've got, you may already have your browser set to download it to a specific location by default, and it's just going to go ahead and start downloading it. And you'll have to open up your browser's options and figure out where that's at. Usually it's in your downloads folder. And like I said at the beginning, I'm assuming that you already know what to do with an ISO image when you've got it downloaded, which is what you're going to get here. It's an actual ISO image of a CD or a DVD. And an ISO image is it's basically a bit-for-bit copy of what's on the CD or DVD. And if you've got burning software installed, it should know what to do with that. You should just be able to double-click on the file, and your software should open up and present you with some options for burning that to a DVD or a CD. And then what you're going to want to do once that's finished is leave it in your CD drive and reboot your machine. Now what you're going to get, and we're doing this on a virtual box here, on a virtual machine, so that I can get the screen recording in there. So your boot devices. Now that is going to be a list of options that your computer has of what it's going to boot from. It's going to boot by default usually from the hard disk first. Some manufacturers have kind of wised up and changed it so that it's gonna go through a couple of things first. If you have a floppy drive, which you probably don't if you bought a new computer in the last couple of years, it's going to look to the floppy first to see if there's anything there to boot from. If not, it'll go to your CD-ROM. And if you're on a newer machine where there is no floppy, it may start off looking at the CD-ROM to see if there's anything there to boot from. If it finds nothing, it'll move on to your hard disk, and it's going to boot Windows or whatever you have installed there already. So one thing that you can do, there's two ways you can go about it. You can go into your setup or the BIOS, and you can tell it, a specific boot order. I'm not going to go into that here because that's different with every manufacturer and every computer. That could be a little bit different where you're going to find that and how to set that up. I'd have to refer you to your manufacturer website for information about how to change the boot order. Most of them you don't actually have to. When you first turn on the machine, you're going to see something like this right here where it says press F12 to select boot device. On your computer, it might be F11, F3. It depends again on the manufacturer and when your computer was made. I believe on Dell, it's usually F11 on Dell machines, not always. But you're just gonna hit that, and it's gonna ask you where you want to boot from. And for this, you're gonna want to hit boot from my CD/DVD drive. So we're gonna go ahead and get our virtual machine going here. Alright, so you can see here's the first menu you're going to get when you boot from that ISO image that we've burned. And it's counting down. If you do nothing and let this count down, it's going to go ahead and start the live CD. If you start going through these options, it stops the counter. If you still want to boot to your hard disk and boot up your copy of Windows, you just select this, although I'm not exactly sure why that's here. Anyway, you can test the memory on your system. And this is real handy. I've actually used this for troubleshooting. Check disk for defects. That's just what it means. It's going to check the disk for problems. We're not going to mess with any of that. I mean, you've got some other options down here: help, language, key map. Most of the time, you're not going to have to bother with any of this. Just hit the Start Kubuntu option here. Now, it's going to go through some stuff here. We may see some warnings or just some random messages going across the screen. Unless you get something like a kernel panic, cannot continue, just don't worry about what you see here. It's detecting your hardware. It's seeing if it's got the right drivers. If it doesn't, it may try some other generic driver, and not all the options would work, so it's going to throw up some warnings. But it should still just continue on through the boot process here and get us to a menu where it's going to ask us if we want to go with the live CD or if we want to go with actually just starting the install. See, here we are with one of these errors that we can pretty much just ignore. It's going to continue. And, it's figuring out our graphics and what we've got here. And so we're going to see some flashes and probably some funky stuff on the screen just because it's deciding how it wants to display what we're doing here. In a moment, we should see our menu come up. I keep using the term live CD, and I don't know if I went over that in my techie terms. I'm going to go ahead and add it now that I think about it. The live CD is one of the great innovations of the Linux community. It is a fantastic way to either to troubleshoot a system. It's also a good way to test out a system. See, we've got this option to try Kubuntu or to install Kubuntu. Now, the try option, you can actually fire up Linux on your computer here from this CD and try it out without making any changes at all to your computer, nothing permanent at all. We can hit this option. It's going to load a complete copy of the operating system into memory, which is not your hard disk. Different thing altogether. Again, refer to my techie terms section at everydaylinux.net for a bit of a description of the difference between those two things. And whatever else it doesn't load into memory, it's gonna pull those off the CD, so it can run the operating system. You can install things, do all kinds of things without actually making changes to your existing operating system at all. And if you decide you don't like it or something doesn't work, you just shut it down. You pop out the CD, you boot up like normal, and you're back to your operating system like nothing ever happened. No changes whatsoever. We're gonna go with that now, just so you can see what that looks like. And of course, we've got this option up here for the language. I'm speaking English. I'm from America. We don't, or from the U.S. We don't typically speak too many other languages, so English it is. Okay, so we're going through our little splash screen here, and it's detecting the hard disk, detecting different hardware, setting up options. All right, and here's our desktop, which is going to be a little bit different than what you're used to seeing in Windows. There's our sound, so we know our sound's working. Okay. I'm not going to go into any detail about like what this is here, what these widgets are. If you're used to Windows 7, you may or may not be familiar with widgets. Again, that's actually something that started in Linux long before Microsoft ever picked it up. There's some pretty cool stuff you can do with widgets, but that's something I will dive into in another tutorial. For right now, we're just going to get the system installed. Same thing with activities. Don't worry about that. So here we are. We've got the live CD installation, or rather operating system booted up. And this is a good way for us to just test some things out. We can see we've got our network connection is showing connected. We know that works. Here you are. You can click on. This is the device manager. You've got something similar in Windows that you can see. If you were to plug in a USB drive right now, you would see that pop up here. All that we're seeing right now is optical disc, which is the CD that we have, and that's the only other option I've got. Our sound options are here, and the clipboard, and of course show desktop, which we haven't got anything else open, so that's all we've got. And over here we've got our K menu, which is, this works exactly the same as your Windows Start menu. You can add things to your favorites, which in Windows 7 you would have anything that you had pinned to the Start menu, same type of thing here. Applications, you can go through these different menus here and see what all you've got, which is just like the All Programs menu in Windows. Computer, this has just got some basic locations that you might want to go to on the computer, your trash bin, all that kind of stuff. And that might be one thing that you're noticing right away on our desktop. We've got no trash bin. There is a widget that you can put on there so you can get to it from the desktop, but this is the other way you can get to that trash bin. Recently used, of course there's nothing in there because we haven't used any applications yet. If we opened up a browser or a text editor or anything, that would show up in here, and it'll keep 5 or 6 of the most recent things that you've used. And then of course the leave option, and here's all of our things. you've seen all this kind of stuff in Windows more than likely. So we're satisfied that everything on our machine is working and not a problem. And I keep saying everything is working. Years ago, especially, I started using Linux in 1999, and at that time, boy, it was a process. And chances are that there weren't Linux drivers for everything out there. Um, there weren't Linux drivers for a lot of stuff out there. And even 7, 8 years ago, that was the case. It was kind of a 50-50 gamble if the hardware on your computer was going to work with Linux, because a lot of manufacturers weren't releasing Linux drivers or weren't releasing the code so that people could make drivers themselves. That has actually changed. Most everything out there now is going to work with Linux. And I say most everything because there are still some devices that just aren't going to work or aren't going to work right, which is unfortunate, but that is the case. Some manufacturers just refuse to open up their information and share that information with the techie community so that people can write their own drivers and make their stuff work, which seems to me would be kind of to their benefit. But at any rate, you're still going to see that occasionally. You're going to plug in something that Linux just doesn't know what to do with it, and that's because there isn't a driver available for Linux. At any rate, as I said, we're satisfied that everything's working okay, so we're going to go ahead and install Kubuntu. That's another difference, by the way. If you didn't notice, I did a single click on that icon. Linux, for the most part, is a single click environment that can be changed, and I can go into that at another time. But as we're going through this, everything is single click, which I kind of prefer. But okay, again, we're into the installation part. We haven't yet made any changes to our system. If you want to go back, if you change your mind, we still can, and you can pop out the CD, and no changes have been made to your system at this point yet. So we're going to go with English again. Continue. And the prepare section here. This is where we're going to decide how we want to use what all we've got. So let's run through some checks. We've got at least 3.9 gigabytes of available hard drive space, which is what Kubuntu is probably going to need, depending on how much software you're going to install. And that's just for the operating system. I would recommend that you've got more than that, and again, chances are, with a newer system, you've got hundreds of gigs available. Is connected to the internet. Now, this one isn't actually required, but it is awfully handy, and I'll explain why. So you see this Kubuntu uses third-party software, blah, blah, blah. This is asking your permission to install any additional software that the installer thinks that you might need. Stuff that isn't part of that isn't part of Linux, that isn't developed by the Linux community or the open source community. It's closed source stuff. It is not free software. That's not to say that it's not monetarily free. You don't have to pay for it, but that's a whole other discussion. So it's just asking you, like Adobe Flash, you're probably going to want that. So we're going to go ahead and install this third-party software. And then we've got this option here, download updates while installing. And that's where this connected to the internet comes in awfully handy. What the installer is going to do is, of course, it's pulling files off of the CD-ROM that we downloaded, and it's using that stuff to install what it needs to get the operating system going. If we have an internet connection and we have this checked, it's actually going to go online and check for newer versions of that software. And if there is a newer version, it's going to download and install that rather than what's on the CD, which is just awfully handy. So we're going to go ahead and check that and hit continue. And you may have also noticed I have a bit of a cold. I live in Montana. Kind of flu season year-round up here. Okay, so here's where we're going to decide what we're going to do with our disk. Now I've already got something installed on here, and I did that deliberately because if you've already got Windows installed on your PC, this is what you're going to see, something like this. You see this before. There's already been 2.1 gigs of space on the drive that's been occupied by something else. This blue stuff is what's available. I've only done about a 10 gig hard drive or 11 gig hard drive. for my virtual machine, you're going to have tremendously more than that. But I just did it for the purpose of our tutorial here. So if you already have Windows installed, again, once we hit this Install Now button, that's the point of no return. It will destroy whatever data you've already got on your system. So you want to make sure this stuff is backed up. Any documents, any pictures, music files, anything you want to keep, back that stuff up to some kind of an external drive before we continue. Because once I hit this Install Now button, it's all gone. However, you do have the option to do a dual boot. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that right now, but what a dual boot is it's going to install Linux alongside Windows on your hard disk. And when you turn on your computer, you're going to be presented with a menu that's going to ask you which operating system you want to boot with. And you can set it to timeout and go to whichever one by default. We're not going to do that here. If you were going to do that, you would select this manual option. And there's a few things, 2 or 3 extra clicks that you would have to go through to figure out how to tell the installer how to handle that. We're not going to do that. We're going to use this guided use entire disk, and it's going to blow away whatever we've already got installed. And you can see under After here, it's occupying 100% of the disk. So again, we're going to hit this install button, and once you do that, that's the point of no return. Okay, it's going to start making changes to your system. So, it's going to get going. It's going to start copying files here in a moment. As it's copying, see there, it's detecting some things and figuring out what to do and formatting the hard drive. Okay, there we are. So as it's copying, it's going to ask us some questions and kind of get this stuff out of the way rather than waiting until the end of the installation. So this stuff's already done. I am in the United States, so we're going to leave that there. This time zone, looking at my clock, is correct, so we're going to leave that alone and hit continue. And we're moving on to our keyboard setup. Again, we're going to leave this with the defaults, unless you have some kind of a non-standard keyboard. And again, that's something else I'm not going to go into. Most people have just an average QWERTY keyboard. There are some different options. There are some different layouts if you got a fancy gaming keyboard, or you're just going to want to stick with this default. If you've got an ergonomic board, this will work with it. If you have just a basic keyboard from Target or Walmart, stick with the defaults here, and this will work with it. Okay, who are you? User information. Self-explanatory. My name is Alan. Pick a username. You can put whatever you want here. You can change this however you like. You're going to need this when you first log into your computer. Choose a password. Confirm your password. And then your computer's name. And you can leave that at the default. You can do whatever you want with that. These options down here are some things you're going to want to think about. Require my password to log in. On most Windows PCs, when you fire them up, it direct from the manufacturer, direct from Dell or HP or wherever you're getting it, it doesn't make you set up a password. It doesn't require you to log in unless you're in some kind of an office environment. If you're at home, it just boots up, comes right up to your desktop, and you're off and running. Linux is tremendously more security conscious. You can go ahead and select this login automatically, and it won't present you with that login screen when you boot up. It'll just go ahead and go right to your desktop. That's entirely up to you. If you're on a home network, your computer never goes anywhere, this is fine. You'll probably be okay with this. I'm a little more paranoid. I'm going to leave this at require my password to log in, and then encrypt my home folder. That's exactly what it says. Your home folder is the folder where all of your information is stored, all of your data, all of your configuration settings is going to be in your home folder. If you have a laptop that you're installing this on, that you take around with you to different locations, I would highly recommend going with this option. Because if you lose that laptop, or if it gets stolen or falls into someone else's hands temporarily, This would prevent them from being able to get into it. And again, I would also have the require my password to log in if this is on a laptop. So with the encrypt my home folder, they wouldn't even be able to pop in some kind of a boot disk or a live CD and go to your folder and read that information because everything would be encrypted. I'll say one more time: if you're on a laptop, I highly suggest doing this encrypt my home folder. It doesn't complicate things. It's just the installation from here on out is exactly the same. Your login is exactly the same. It'll decrypt it every time you log in, and it'll encrypt it every time you log out. We're not going to mess with that here because we're going to assume this is a home computer that never goes anywhere. Chances of it getting stolen are pretty slim. So we're going to leave that exactly what we've got here and continue. So what we're going to see here while it's copying and then configuring things and downloading updates, it's just going to walk us through some different screens, giving you information about what all you've got, what your options are, all the really neat stuff that you can do with Kubuntu. I'm going to go ahead and pause this recording while it's doing the installation, and then I'll pick it up again when we get towards the end of the installation, just to save us some time on the tutorial here. Okay, so we finished the installation portion here, and it's getting ready to reboot. And so here's your two options here: continue testing or restart now. The warning here states, any changes you've made or documents you save will not be preserved. What that means is anything you've done or downloaded or changed or altered while in the live CD environment here it isn't going to be saved. It's all going to be gone when we reboot here, other than the changes that we made, during the installation procedure. Now these live CDs, I think I mentioned before, can be used for troubleshooting an existing system. You can mount your hard disk and go in there and make changes. That kind of stuff will stick, but that's not anything that we're even remotely concerned with right now. This is just an installation. So we're going to go ahead and hit the restart now button there. And we should get a prompt when it's all shut down to eject our CD so that it can boot normally into our new Linux environment. Okay, so there's our little warning here. Please remove installation media and close the tray, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I'm running a virtual machine here, so I remove my little virtual disk. And then enter, and it's going to reboot. And we're going to boot into our newly installed Kubuntu Linux environment. So, what we're seeing here is just the loading of the operating system. And it's the equivalent of the Windows XP or Windows 7 splash that you would normally see if you were going into Windows. And now we're beginning to load the desktop, and we will be presented with our login screen here in a moment. And there we are. So, my username was Alan. Put in my highly secure, complex password. Hit enter or click the little arrow button there. And we're booting up our desktop. And these little icons here are just kind of indicators of what the system is doing as it progresses through the procedure of loading different things in and doing little checks. The new icons will appear. So it gives you a little bit of an indication of where we are in the boot process. Yay! Okay, here we are at our fresh new desktop. Um, so that's going to conclude our installation procedure. Okay, so we officially have Kubuntu Linux installed. I'm going to go ahead and stop this tutorial here. Yeah, we're still loading a few things down there. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop the tutorial here, and the next one I do is going to be a little bit about customizing this. And oh, there's our boot music. I'm going to do another tutorial about customizing your desktop and installing whatever additional software you would like. Everything's here. Yeah, so we're good to go. Okay. So thanks for tuning into episode 1, and I'll see you soon at episode 2. Again, if you had any questions, feel free to email or comment, and I'll answer those as best I can for you. Thanks again.